Greetings fellow Mist Wanderers, my name is Steve Morgan, this is DM of the Mists, covering all things Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. In today's video we're going to be talking about alternative intro adventures you can consider for Curse of Strahd that aren't Death House. Now one thing I want to make really clear from the offset is I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Death House. I'm not saying you shouldn't run Death House. I'm not saying you should run something else. I'm just offering a few alternatives for DMs who maybe don't want to run Death House for a number of reasons. One might be you've already run it as a one-shot. One might be that you don't like the themes of it or you want to do something different. In my case, before DMing Curse of Strahd for myself, I was a player in someone else's game and they had started Curse of Strahd with a bunch of players and it ended up in a TPK in Death House, but they all wanted to try again. So instead of running Death House again, he decided to run something else, and that's when I joined. So we did something else. It's actually one of the ones I'm going to talk about later. And I've never even run Death House myself because my players started Curse of Strahd at level 5 following Lost Mine of Phandelver, so I completely skipped and bypassed Death House. That's a whole other video I've done if you are in a similar boat and thinking of running Curse of Strahd for a slightly higher level party, whether it's after Lost Mine of Phandelver or another adventure that finishes around that level. They're all intended for levels 1 to 3 unless otherwise stated. And so the idea is that your players start Curse of Strahd properly. Instead of going to Death House, they go straight to the village of Barovia at level 3. And for the majority of them, the hook that probably makes the most sense and is the easiest and the likeliest to do following running it is the Creeping Fog hook. So we won't be doing the ones where they meet the Vistani first of all necessarily, well, sort of with one of them, or werewolves or anything like that. The idea is that rather than doing they arrive into Barovia, do Death House, and that gets them from level 1 to 3. They do something else, and when they reach level 3, that's when they get dragged into Barovia. Except for maybe one of them, we'll see. One thing I should say is that there will be spoilers for each of the adventures I cover, so please be warned if you like the sound of some of these but think, oh, actually, maybe you're a player in someone else's game and they're a DM, then you might want to click away and that's fine. Maybe a DM, someone who DMs for you, plans to run one of these, then you might want to click away, that's fair enough. But anything I talk about is fair game. I would talk about spoilers. For one or two of them, I might talk about plot twists when I talk about, this is actually what happens and things like that. So just, this is your warning. And I should be clear as well, I have not played all of them. I think I've played about 2 or 3 of them. One of them isn't really a one-shot, but as you'll find out when I say it, but I've run it in my campaign. Another one I ran as a higher level than intended, and another one I ran and I think it ended up fizzling out. It was just it was supposed to be a 2-3 session thing, and then I only ended up running half of it, just because people got busy and we decided to just can it basically. But yeah, so I can't say that I've run all of these, so just please bear that in mind. It's easy for me to say, you should run this, and I haven't run it. I wanted to be upfront about that. Be better if I had run them all, but I'm only one person and I only have so much time. And we'll start with one that it was actually my first experience of D&D, 5th edition. It's called The Wolves of Welton. This is available for free online through the people who made it, their website. They're called Winghorn Press. And I was a player in this, and then I later tried to run it for people as kind of like an intro adventure, but unfortunately, it is, even though it's advertised as a single session adventure, I was going to do it across 2 and 3 sessions, and it sadly fizzled out after the first session, which was frustrating, but it is what it is. The story of it is essentially there's this town called Welton, which you can put in the Sword Coast in the Forgotten Realms setting, or anywhere if you want, or change the name of it or whatever. The PCs are on their way to somewhere in a wagon, and when they get near this town or village, they find some wolves attacking some sheep, some farmers, and the wolves are very intelligent. They're tactical, they're smarter than your average wolf. Players then can go to the town and find out some information. It turns out that there was a sorcerer who was at the village who tried to sort out the wolf problem, and he disappeared, and what happened was his magic, I don't think he was a wild magic sorcerer and he exploded or something, but his magic imprinted on the wolves and it gave them sapience. And it made 2 of them magical, so there's kind of like 2 alphas, and they can do magical attacks as well, which is really cool. So the wolves can talk, they've got human level intelligence, it's really cool. I suppose with the wolf, there's a wolf tie-in to Curse of Strahd, so we then, went to Barovia after that and fought more wolves, and me being a completely new player to D&D was like, oh, I know what these guys can do, except these ones don't talk. And it's a really fun adventure. And then once you complete it and you sort out the wolf problem, and there's multiple ways you can do it, they carry on their journey to wherever. When I was a player, we were told we were on our way to Neverwinter in the Sword Coast, and that's when the mist surrounded us and took us to Barovia. I really recommend it. It's a really good adventure, whether you run it as an intro to Curse of Strahd or as a one-shot. Take a look at it. It is suggested for players 2nd and 3rd level. When my DM ran it, we all started at level 1. Which was a little tricky, especially because there's a injured owlbear as one of the fights. I remember my PC getting KO'd by a natural 20 that luckily didn't kill me outright, and I think even though they rolled a natural 20, they rolled low on the damage dice, thankfully. So you might want to, I don't know, tone it down, or maybe give the reward the 2nd level straight after the first battle or something like that. Number 2, Sunless Citadel. This appears in the Tales from the Yawning Portal book. It's considered a classic adventure. I've heard so many people say so many good things about it. I haven't run it myself, but I did watch some friends of mine did a charity 24-hour D&D marathon online streamed for charity, and I'm pretty sure they played part of it, and I watched a few, half an hour of it. It was pretty cool. The story is, to give a summary of it, there's a druid who discovers a Gulthias tree. There's actually a Gulthias tree in Curse of Strahd, and I think that's why a number of DMs like to do Sunless Citadel. If they're not doing Death House, do Sunless Citadel first, because there's a potential tie-in there. And inside the dungeon, there's a group of goblins and a group of kobolds battling for territory. So it's quite cool. That's kind of classic D&D. There's a classic D&D monsters. And eventually you reach this grove with this evil druid in this Gulthias tree. I've heard that it's a really good adventure for brand new DMs and brand new players, or maybe brand new players more than brand new DMs maybe, but I've always wanted to run it and may consider running it as a one-shot one time. Number 3, House of Lament. This is the one-shot that appears in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. For those of you who don't know, this is the sort of wider setting, Ravenloft setting book. There are other Domains of Dread out there. I inserted this sort of mid-campaign in my current campaign I'm running on, which is a sort of post-Curse of Strahd, sequel to Curse of Strahd, Ravenloft domain hopping campaign, when my players met the Weathermay Foxgrove twins, who are 2 of Rudolf van Richten's proteges. They go into the House of Lament. I talk about this, I recently put out a Weathermay Foxgrove twins video, and I talk a little bit about that there. But essentially it is also intended as like a level 1 to 3 adventure. There's different ways you can play it. There's almost like 3, you can have the sort of main ghost or spirit be 1 of 3 people, so there's potential replayability. When I did it, I had it be 2 of them who were active at the same time. And there's a seance board as well, which is really cool. And I played it through Roll20, and I was able to move the is it called a planchette? The little thing that moves? I was able to move that slowly in Roll20. It's like its own little token. You can move it across the board. I think my players really enjoyed it. If you are considering running it instead of Death House, you get to choose who the investigators are. Now in my game, I chose Weathermay Foxgrove twins because my players had just met them. The other suggestions are Alanic Ray and Arthur Sedgwick, who are sort of like Ravenloft's answer to Sherlock Holmes and Watson. They're pretty cool. Irina and Esmeralda, I think that would be a weird choice given that they appear, especially the Irina, appear in Curse of Strahd, and one of them can be Van Richten and his teenage son Erasmus, who sort of follows him as a ghost, who doesn't appear in Curse of Strahd even though Van Richten does. If you were considering it instead of Death House, I would choose probably either Alanic and Arthur or the Weathermay Foxgrove twins. Kind of keep Irina, Ez, and Van Richten for later on. I think it'd be weird, might be a bit too weird and jarring, confusing to have them as being the investigators. On the other hand, it could be cool to introduce them. Maybe not Irina, but maybe Ez. Could just be Ez on her own, maybe. Introduce them, and then later on, when they see them later on, whether they see Ez in Kresk or they see Van Richten at his tower, that could be quite a cool reveal. It's like, hey, we saw you guys earlier. But I don't know, I would think Alanic and Arthur or Weathermay Foxgrove twins. And it's cool as well to introduce other potential proteges who they then, for adventures after Curse of Strahd, if you consider continuing doing it like I've done, could be something to consider. Number 4, Sacrifice of Innocence. I've run this as a one-shot. This takes a bit of explaining. So for those of you familiar with Matt Colville, the sort of guru D&D DM, of MCDM, I think his production company's called, who put out Flee Mortals. I love Matt Colville. I take everything he says as gospel. Well, almost everything. But I watched his videos really closely when I first started DMing, and he gives amazing advice, and he's great. He devised a really simple adventure. It was a video he did where he was almost like, let's just come up with a dungeon. Let's make sure this dungeon has in a couple of rooms, at least 1 trap, a couple of low-level minions and a boss room. And he called it the Delian Tomb. And the Sacrifice of Innocence is being adapted. It's the Delian Tomb adapted as a prequel to Lost Mine of Phandelver. Now, I discovered this after I'd already started running Lost Mine of Phandelver. Otherwise, I think I probably would have done it. I think the idea of it is because Lost Mine of Phandelver, especially early on, is quite tough. The idea is that this is like a mini adventure just before it that gets them from level 1 to level 2. So they start Lost Mine of Phandelver at level 2 instead of level 1, which makes the first couple of, the first main dungeon they go to in Lost Mine of Phandelver a little bit easier. Or a little less hard is probably the more accurate way to put it. When I ran it as a one-shot, I just ran it for some people who were brand new to D&D. It's about 6 people who all wanted to give it a go. I kind of did it as a taster session and we had a lot of fun. And I think they enjoyed it. And essentially the story is, it's got even, well, I don't know if this is true of the Delian Tomb, but Sacrifice of Innocence starts in a tavern, very classic D&D move. And the idea is that it's on the road between Neverwinter and Phandalin. The two, because in spoilers, Lost Mine of Phandelver and I suppose Shattered Obelisk, which is kind of where it's been sort of updated in. You start the adventure on the road on the way to Phandalin, and this is intended to be just before they get to the first encounter in Lost Mine of Phandelver. There's a farmer comes in and says, help my son or daughter, I can't remember, is being kidnapped by some goblins. And then you go to their little hideout, the Delian Tomb, if you will, and rescue the child before they get, something happens to them in the ritual. And it's just got so many classic D&D beats. I think for new players who are, then are going to go into Curse of Strahd, I think it could work really well as a one-shot. If you do decide to do this, I wouldn't then... Don't do the whole surprise them thing where they might think they're going to play Lost Mine of Phandelver and you're like, whoops, plot twist, we're actually doing Curse of Strahd and you're in Barovia. I'd probably just treat it as they're on their way somewhere and, similar to when I talked about Wolves of Welton, and just have it that they, as they go from Neverwinter to Phandalin, the mistake. You don't want your players thinking, we're going to do Lost Mine of Phandelver and get excited about Lost Mine of Phandelver, and then you do the rug pull and, actually they're going somewhere else. Just treat it as you're going to somewhere, this happens on the way, and then, missed. Number 5, Book of the Raven. This appears in Candlekeep Mysteries. This might be an odd choice, actually. I wasn't sure to include this one. It's thematically appropriate, because there's Vistani in it, and there's were-ravens in it. But it's intended for level 3 players. So what you could consider is maybe tone it down a little bit, or maybe have them start at level 2 instead of level 1, or do a quick encounter where, I don't know, there's some goblins on the road, and then that gets them from level 1 to level 2, something like that. It's just a really simple, easy encounter where you can legitimately say, you've leveled up. And then start them properly at level 2, and then run through it at level 2, and then maybe tone it down as well. There's a bit where there's a few ghouls later on, maybe have fewer ghouls, or remove an encounter or 2. Another thing you consider as well is maybe a were-raven goes with them. And I think it suggests that the were-ravens are quite wary of the players and don't help them out, but maybe have one say, fine, I'll help you. And they can act as a bit of a meat shield. They're probably a little bit stronger. Depending on which were-raven stat block you use, they're either immune to non-magical damage or they regenerate health really quickly. So they could be like the meat shield that protects the players if things do go horrible with however many ghouls you're supposed to throw at them later on. The story goes, I'm looking at a screen over here to remind me, they discover a book. It can even be delivered by Raven, how fitting. And it has a tale of Vistani kindness in it, so they learn a bit about the Vistani. And it contains a treasure map as well. And this is the map where it kind of tells people where they can go. The starting point is a hamlet called Witchway. And eventually they get to a chalet. There are were-ravens there. And then there's a map of the chalet, and they go through the chalet, and they end up at some sort of shadow crossing. I think that's where most of the monsters are. It's a fun adventure by the looks of it. I've not run it myself. I would love to, actually, at one point. It's very appropriate with the fact it's got not just the Vistani and the were-ravens, but it's also got things like gargoyles and a wight and ghouls, all of which kind of appear in Curse of Strahd later on. So it's one of those where it's very fitting theme-wise, but out of all the choices I've given, it's the one that I'm kind of the least sure about, probably because of the fact that, the level issue and things like that, and having to make tweaks to make it work. But you've got a cool way to transition. There's a thing where they can go back to the material plane, so I think they kind of end up in the Shadowfell briefly. And then that could be when they go to return to the material plane, that's how they end up in Barovia. So that could be a really good way to siege into Curse of Strahd. Number 6, Salted Legacy. This appears in Journey Through the Radiant Citadel. This, I'll be honest with this one, this is the one I know I just said that Book of the Raven I wasn't sure of, but this is probably the weirdest choice in all of this. It's the wild card, and I wouldn't have thought to include it, but I saw some people on the Curse of Strahd Facebook group talk about how it was fun to run. Maybe not necessarily as an intro to Curse of Strahd, because I think it is a bit of a weird tone shift, because the adventure is quite quirky, and then going to Curse of Strahd from there is a bit like, oh. Maybe they meant it in terms of just running it as a completely separate adventure, as a one-shot or something. But I wanted to include it just in case anyone fancied running it. It's about a busy marketplace. There's two rival stall owners who think that the other one is sabotaging their stall, but it turns out there's other people up to mischief, and the players have to figure out who's at the bottom of it and why they're doing what they're doing. I think I'll leave it at that. It's quite a number of pages. It's intended for level 1. Maybe you could bump them up to level 2, maybe even level 3 by the end of it. But yeah, that could be one to check out as well. It looks like it's quite fun, quite interesting, but I don't know. If anyone's run it, let me know. And if anyone's run it as actually as a replacement for Death House and then went into Curse of Strahd, I'd really like to know your thoughts. So please leave a comment and let me know. And number 7, another one from Van Richten's guide, but it's not a dedicated adventure. This is the one where you probably need to semi-homebrew some stuff. Is you could have the Ravenloft Carnival visit. I've seen some DMs say they do this where they, instead of Death House, this is how they get people into Barovia. The Carnival visits and the players visit, and then I don't know how you then transition getting them from the Carnival to Barovia. Maybe the Carnival moves on, or the Carnival, something happens and they're like, can you check this thing? And when they go to check, the Carnival is gone, not really the Carnival's fault, maybe the mist blocks the way, and that's how they get led to Barovia proper. Or maybe they're just left behind in Barovia, similar to that one hook where the Vistani just kind of, I think the players are sleeping overnight and then the Vistani are gone when they wake up in the morning. Maybe something like that. The whole thing with the Carnival is the Dark Lord Isolde is getting terrorized by evil fey creatures. Now, if you're running this as a level 1, level 2 thing, you can't throw anything too heavy at them. Looking in the monster manual, the weakest fey stat blocks are things like blink dogs, pixies and sprites. The issue I have, I guess, is that they are all good creatures. Perhaps they've been manipulated or charmed to attack, or maybe they have been lied to and told that Isolde is this evil person. They think they're doing good. Either way, the players could help Isolde and other people in the Carnival to fight them off. And then you could do a mini boss. Maybe the person behind it is something like a sea hag or a green hag. That might be a bit too high challenge rating for level 1, maybe level 2 characters. It might be all right, but that could be the consideration. If there's a hag behind it, and the hags are evil, this hag wants to defeat, terrorize, make Isolde's life miserable. If it ends up becoming a bit like you put in some encounters and it ends up being a bit too tough for the players, you could have Isolde or maybe another person in the Carnival help out. There's like one that's a druid, one that's a veteran, things like that. You could have them maybe help out the players as well. That's it for this one. I think this is going to be quite a short video compared to some of my others. What do you think? Have you run something different to Death House? Have you run one of the ones I've mentioned, whether as a one-shot or somewhere, somehow else, or as a replacement for Death House? Please do let me know. Is there something else I've not included in this list that works really well instead of Death House? Please let me know in the comments. It'd be good to see. It'd be good to get your thoughts. A video is coming up. I did tease in a recent video that I was going to tackle all the fated allies. When I made that claim, I thought there was only about 10 of them. I think there's actually about 20. So yeah, I am really reluctant to... I always say I'm reluctant. I just think it'd be a big undertaking. I might do is, instead of doing one long video that covers all 20, I might do 2 videos looking at 10 each and then kind of split them. Maybe treat them as like A to Z, and it's like A to L and then N to Z. Do it that way. But I think it'd be good. I was thinking of talking about how I'd roleplay them, how I'd run them in combat, any cool ideas or things that I've had for them, that kind of thing. Maybe talk about how it happened, when Aragorn was met in my campaign, or Ez or Van Richten, this is what happened. And even if obviously there's only one fated ally per adventure if you're running it rules as written, but it might be worth watching it to see how, if you're thinking, oh, how do I roleplay this character? Well, I'll cover off each of them in turn. And we'll leave it there. Thank you, Miss Wanderers.